Welcome, welcome to Catching Up with Conception, where I, Audra Smith, fertility coach, host interviews about all things fertility. Nothing is off limits, and we are here for radical acceptance of the good, the bad, and everything in between in the world of fertility. Now, if you like what you hear today, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. It may not seem like much, but engaging with the content helps so much. Also, if you connect with this content, please reach out so we can help you and meet you wherever you're at. Welcome, welcome. Today on Catching Up with Conception, we have Alex Rose, who works at Gig Harbor Acupuncture and Holistic Healing, here to talk to us about the awesomeness of acupuncture and how that kind of hangs out in the world of fertility. Welcome, Alex.
Hi there. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do?
So I'm a practitioner of Chinese medicine. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and an uh, Asian medicine practitioner here in the state of Washington. So,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's in
Washington.
Gig
That's where Gig
Harbor.
Harbor is.
As you can tell by the name, it's in Gig Harbor, Washington, which is an absolutely beautiful place to be.
Oh, yeah.
And I landed here about a year and a half ago, but I've been doing acupuncture for about 18 years.
Oh,
So
wow. How did you kind of find your way to that?
Well, I actually majored in undergrad in international affairs with a focus on China. And so I ended up
Oh,
going over to Asia actually a lot while I was in school. And my mother was a pathologist. And so I grew up in a hospital and hanging out with her. And
yeah.
when I got to China and I was also in India, I noticed that their medical systems were fully integrated with things like acupuncture and herbs, and that they would use western and allopathic medicine whenever they would need to, but then go back to herbal medicine or acupuncture as a means of treating if that was indicated. So,
That's awesome.
and it was also very accessible to everybody, and you would
Mm-hmm.
see acupuncturists all over the place, as well as people doing cupping or moxibustion, which is the burning of a particular herb on acupuncture points. So that's something that
Oh,
is done a lot in China, but is not done here so much. And the reason why it's not done here is actually kind of weird, is that when they stopped allowing smoking in buildings, you can't burn anything in the building. And so a
oh,
lot of the times it's about a smoking ordinance and rules that you have with your landlord in the practice building. So that's one of the reasons why moxibustion has gone down in popularity over the years, not because it's not something good. It's just that it's
yeah.
not allowed and it creates a lot of smell.
Oh, no, that's so interesting. Like yes, it's good. You shouldn't smoke inside, but it's interesting to think of, kind of the other little trickle effects that happen with that.
Well, the smell is very permeating of something like that. And so it's not something that you would be able to hide or just do, because it would make the whole building almost smell like that. So if you're sharing
Oh,
with
wow.
tenants, then that can be a
Yeah.
problem.
They may
Yeah.
not love it.
So that's the reason for I don't want to say the death of that modality, but just you don't see it as much as you would think. And it's not because it's not useful, especially when you're talking about pregnancy and conception. We're trying to warm the uterus in some cases, and
Mhm.
so something like moxibustion is a useful method.
It's a useful tool, it's just not one that is easily accessible given
Yep.
the laws and regulations.
Yes, exactly.
So
Exactly.
you, went over there and you saw all of it and you were like, "Hey, this is what I wanna do."
Yeah, I actually came back and I started a Ayurvedic program at the Ayurvedic Institute in New Mexico with a man named Dr. Vasant Lad. And I actually studied with him for a year and got my certificate in Ayurveda because I didn't know where I was going with the whole thing.
Yeah,
And through that, I actually met a couple of acupuncturists, and it seemed natural for me to go into that given my background with my studies, because I had learned a lot
absolutely.
about Chinese culture and history, just given the fact that I was studying their international affairs
Mhm.
situation. But I just realized, when I was in school for undergrad, that I wasn't very diplomatic, and I didn't really want to go into a civil service type of
Hmm.
career, and I wasn't going to be a diplomat going to China and negotiating deals.
Yeah.
I was more into the history and culture. And so eventually, when I graduated after about a year of studying Ayurveda, I went to study Chinese medicine, which is a 4-year master's degree. So I got my master's of
Oh,
science in
wow.
Oriental medicine. So that's the degree that we all get in order to practice acupuncture. Some people don't know how involved the degree actually is, because you have to go through a lot in terms of learning all of those points,
Oh,
and then you
yeah. That's
have
a
to learn
lot.
the indication of all of those points, and you have to know the anatomy very well before you even start needling.
Very
So the
well.
first couple of years is very heavy on anatomy, point location, and point indication. So,
I found, like, when I was younger, like, we'll call them hard sciences, right? Because my master's is in psychology. And I don't love that they call it a soft science, but I kind of get it. But they use the scientific method. That's a soapbox for another day. But
right?
when I was younger, I did not enjoy biology. I didn't like chemistry. I didn't like any, I was like, science is not for me. And then when I started going down the path of like wanting to work in the realm of fertility, infertility, all of that, um, just learning about my own body and like the processes that I went through, like I loved my anatomy classes and I took them. They were accelerated, right? Because I was like, oh, I've got these classes I want to take. I've taken accelerated classes before. It'll be fine. Folks, if anyone's listening and thinking about taking an accelerated anatomy class, don't. It's so much. And part of it, like, I kept up, right? I got A's and it was fine, but I wanted to spend more time, like, in that material because I
Yes.
enjoyed it so much. And, you know, so I worked with your colleague, right? She did acupuncture with me and she talked about all of the kind of like what you said, combining, Western and Eastern practices. She talked about the science of it. She talked about the neurotransmitters and, the flow of energy and all of these things. And I was enamored, right? About how she talked about it. It like melded the two worlds. And because I'd never done acupuncture before. And so I didn't know really what to expect. And it was just, I loved it.
Well, acupuncture is, because it's such an old science, we're also learning how to explain it using new terminology as we have,
Hmm.
developed the sciences over the last 300 years. Allopathic medicine is fairly young compared to something like Chinese medicine
Yeah.
or Ayurvedic medicine. And so to see how we get the terminology and we learn more about the human body, and then all of a sudden we see how that's what they were trying to explain with
Hmm.
terminology they had at the time. That's why
Yeah.
sometimes Chinese medicine can be very poetic or very literal in its meaning.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, there's a formula for having a very strong cough. It's called stop coughing powder. It's very easy to
Yeah.
deal with. It's telling you what it is in the title. A lot of points also, if you speak Chinese, will tell you what the point does in the title, or it has a poetic name, like Heaven's Gate or something like that, or the Gate of the
Yeah.
Spirit, things like that. But then we learn, what is that actually doing? Maybe it has a strong effect on the vagus nerve in order to allow for calming, or
Yeah.
it's something that is going to, you know, keep you from having urgent urination. All of these things are sometimes explained poetically through the literature, but it also has a very strong scientific backing. We just didn't have the terminology at the time.
Yeah. Or you had the terminology, we've just come up with different ones, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I just love it. I could listen to you talk about like the history and the culture of it all day because it's very interesting. But I want to know, can you talk a little bit about acupuncture, holistic healing, and how it relates and can support people who are struggling to conceive? or trying to conceive, right? It doesn't even necessarily have to be struggling, but kind of in that realm.
Yeah, I come in contact with people dealing with conception at different stages. So some people are just starting their journey and may have just irregular periods or a lot of PMS that they want to get under control. Some people have higher or harder diagnoses, like something like PCOS or
Mhm.
or pituitary tumors, things like that, that are chronic but that can also hinder conception.
Yeah.
Even something like hypothyroidism. That's something that is very common for people to find out while they're trying to conceive. They find out that maybe they're a little low and that they
Yeah, their
need to
thyroid's
have
not doing
that
what they should
managed,
be.
right? So I come in contact with people also who are maybe older and are dealing with egg retrievals, the
Mhm.
harvesting process or of the embryos, and all of that is very involved and hard for women to deal with. There's a lot
Yes.
of juggling of injections, different medications, all of the appointments that you need to have, all of the
Boy,
information
howdy, are you
of
nailing it
your
on the head,
diet.
Alex?
Yeah, you know. So, if you're just, going from irregular periods all the way to a stronger diagnosis, we see women and treat them with acupuncture and sometimes Chinese herbs. Sometimes we don't want to use Chinese herbs too much because a lot of women are dealing with injections and different medications at the time. And so
Mhm.
a lot of things that may be helpful can be done through food as well. So making sure that your gut is on point is also a part of that journey. So I know that you've had people on here that talk about gut health and the fertility
Mhm.
journey, and that is very interesting and something that needs to be addressed. Now, we also see people that have varying ideas about how acupuncture can help them. So, all the way from, oh, well, I'm having my transfer in 2 weeks, and they come to see me that day. And I'm like, 2 weeks isn't very much time. A lot of times, we work with women starting at the beginning of the journey, and treatment is going through a longer period of time because we're dealing with cycles and it takes
Mhm.
weeks and months in order to get things to regulate and
There can
become
be
normalized.
physiological results, not just like the emotional calm, is
Oh,
what you're saying with
absolutely.
acupuncture.
Yeah, there's lots of one of the things that is very helpful is making sure that you have healthy follicles
Mhm.
for the if they want to do IVF and embryo transfers, then we want to make sure that they have enough follicles in order to have a good chance that they're going to have a healthy pregnancy. So that
And
they're
acupuncture is something that can support that?
absolutely. So a lot of times I'll see women when they're trying to go through the follicular stimulating process where they want to get good healthy follicles, and then they're able to have a lot, so that because really you want to be able to have 20, 30, 40 chances in order to get
Yeah.
pregnant. That would be ideal instead of maybe dealing with 8 or 10 follicles. That's actually a fairly low number, and you don't have as much leeway. You want to have as
Yeah.
much chance as possible, um, because it doesn't always work the first time.
Yes, that is
As a
true.
lot of women know, they go through this process multiple times actually before when a pregnancy actually takes.
And so can you kind of walk us through like so say someone comes into the clinic and says, "Hey, I am struggling to conceive. I would like to work with you." Can you kind of walk us through like what that process looks like?
Yeah, well, always coming in for an initial consultation and acupuncture treatment. That's what we do in the first visit is we go through the medical history and we go through their goals for treatment, and then we'll do the acupuncture treatment at that time. I always try to make the appointments, even subsequent appointments, very treatment heavy. Talking is important, but then also
Mhm.
we want to make sure you have a maximum amount of time with the needles because things take time in order to treat. An
Yeah.
acupuncture treatment is something that you want to be relaxed enough for, have enough time for. You don't want to be rushing.
Mhm.
So it's really an hour, for the needles to be affecting either the chemicals in our body, our neurotransmitters. Uh, a lot of the different hormones in our body can be affected by acupuncture treatment. And so all of that takes time, though, to stimulate, and you have to be relaxed in order for that to happen. So when you
Yeah.
come in for treatment, each treatment should be relaxing. It's not a painful process. It's, minimally invasive, but it's very
Right.
powerful, especially when you build on each treatment. So that's, one of the things to remember is that it's not a matter of coming in for one or two treatments before you're going to have the transfer. Or if you're, dealing with other aspects of infertility, these aren't things that are going to happen in one or two treatments. You're
Yeah.
going to have to come over a period of time and a period of appointments in order to get things straightened out. So, making sure your periods are regular, making sure you're not having any PMS symptoms like headaches or cramping or heavy
Mhm.
bleeding, too many clots. Those are all things that we want to get ironed out before you even start the IVF process.
And can you talk a little about how acupuncture does it? Or like how acupuncture like affects these things?
Well, in general, so, a lot of what we're doing is we're trying to regulate the blood flow to the uterus and to the ovaries and the fallopian tubes. We want to make sure that anything that is unfortunately substantial, so if there's scar tissue or if
Mhm.
there's lack of blood flow to an area, if there's problems with the bowels, we'll be putting a number of needles into the abdomen in order to allow the intestines and the uterus to relax in order to increase blood flow to those organs. We're also working on the brain because, when you're dealing with pregnancy, all of a sudden, you have to use both the anterior and posterior pituitary. And our anterior pituitary doesn't like to work, it's not normally working. And so all of a sudden in
Mhm.
pregnancy, we have to start waking it up and saying, hey, I need you to produce some hormones for me so that I can have a successful pregnancy. Okay.
Mhm.
So, that's another thing that we do. And that also is very heavy on the side of when people are getting ready for labor. We want to be doing a lot of scalp points to stimulate the anterior pituitary so that oxytocin can be naturally produced as opposed to having to have it
Mm.
injected with the Pitocin, so
Yeah.
which is the synthetic
Yeah.
form. So we would
So that can help like elicit labor, right? Without having to have
absolutely,
that.
absolutely. And, a lot of things are done by having effects on major nerve trunks and nerve roots and allowing it to increase blood flow and by increasing blood flow making sure that there's the health of the nerves in that area so that they can work properly because the nerve stimulation is going to be important for hormonal regulation because that it's nerves that are going to stimulate our endocrine glands to produce the chemicals that we need as well as there are connective tissue, which has to do a lot of reorganization in order to get ready for a pregnancy. So that's another thing
Yes,
that
it
is very
does.
helpful during the second trimester of while we're treating women. We'll do a lot of points that are helpful for the connective tissue to make room for the baby because they're dealing with a lot of instability of joints, the destabilizing effects of estrogen on
Yes.
the skeletal musculoskeletal system. So that's something, that we also treat. And just the pain of that, it's almost like arthritic pain that can happen in some of the joints
Yeah,
um,
it's not fun.
when dealing with uh, treatment during pregnancy. So, and a lot of times I talk about treatment during pregnancy, because once we have gone through the infertility portion and we get to the
Mhm.
happy pregnancy part, treatment doesn't stop, so you get pregnant, but you want to continue on with treatment to make sure, again, like you have healthy thyroid levels. In the first trimester, you're working hard with acupuncture to prevent miscarriage. Then in the second trimester, you're working hard to decrease any pain and work with the connective tissue to make room. And then in the third trimester, you're working again with a musculoskeletal system to make the pregnancy comfortable. But then you're also preparing, again, like I said, the anterior pituitary to be making hormones in order to make labor easier for you. And that's another reason
Well, yeah,
too
and
why.
it's more support too, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
the support doesn't stop like, okay, you're pregnant, peace out. We're not going to talk to you anymore,
Right.
right? Like that support is still there and especially with those who have struggled to get pregnant or struggled to
Yes.
stay pregnant, like it's exciting, you're pregnant, that's great, but I know for me and I know that I'm not the only one. Was not I did not feel secure in the fact that I had grown and made a baby until I heard the sound of her cry, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
like it didn't matter, right? Like it didn't matter that I was like, in labor. I didn't believe it until like I heard her voice because of all the stuff that I had dealt with before. And so having that additional support, I think is such a wonderful thing.
Well, a lot of times it can be helpful to, for women to have a weekly appointment where they can go and they can do something about the issue. When we're in the office,
Mhm.
especially during the beginning process where they're trying to iron out their menstrual cycles and beginning the IVF process and understanding all of the injections and also dealing with the waiting periods and then positive negative tests, things like that. That's always so hard to deal with. And having an acupuncturist and other practitioners like you, that help deal with that type of thing is very helpful. So they come into the office, and not only can we work on it with the needles, but they can also talk about it and have a sounding board as to what they can do. So a lot
Yeah.
of times, we'll be talking about the different foods that they can eat, although sometimes it can be hard because there's a lot of cravings and a lot of dysregulation that happens when they're using,
Mhm.
synthetic hormones in order to stimulate things. You get weird cravings for things, and it can be hard to sometimes just have a set regimented diet
Absolutely.
when you're dealing with the roller coaster of emotions that is induced by the hormones that you're taking a lot of the times
Mhm.
in order to increase your follicles or get you ready for
Yeah.
the embryo harvesting. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a big thing and having guidelines of what is healthy to eat is what I found helpful, right?
mhm.
And but even having like you said that sounding board, someone to say, "Hey, these are some things that we can like prioritize that are going to help support this like process." Um
Well,
I
and
think is
women are
really
so
great.
hard on themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
we
that's
are.
probably one thing that I see is that, sometimes they think that the one thing that they did one day or one thing that they did that was not right has completely blown their chances. And, those
Yeah.
are situations that we want to avoid because that's putting a lot of
Pressure and
pressure,
stress and
and stress, everything that you're doing, everything that you're eating, everything that you're thinking, everything that you're doing with your body is going to have an effect on whether or not you will get pregnant. It's a psychology that happens, that I see happen for women.
And so you're just like you're in fight or flight mode like all the time. And so it's just nice that like and with acupuncture, right, you have to slow down. Right? It
Yes.
like forces you to regulate your nervous system, which is so important. Like your body has to have a break, right? And I
Yep.
have people talk to me all the time like is my stress causing like making it harder to get pregnant, right? It's the chicken or the egg, right?
Yep.
Or is it that it's stressful to, or it's hard to get pregnant and so that is like what's stressing me out and it's just this big vicious cycle and I just like want to wrap them in like big hugs and say you're doing a great job, you're doing all that you can, right? Like it's insanely hard to actually make a baby, right? The people who
Yes.
just like get pregnant, like that is like the fact that that happens is wild, right? Because all of these things have to be just right in
Yes.
order for pregnancy and successful pregnancy to like happen and trying to kind of destigmatize that like I don't like the word normal, I don't like the word common, but statistically not getting pregnant right away or struggling to get pregnant like is a thing, right?
Yes,
And it's just
absolutely.
not talked about. And so people like hide and like they feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me. No, there's not like there are things that we can look at or things that we can help, but that doesn't mean like there's anything wrong with you as a person. And like you said, they're just hard on themselves, and I just want to hug them.
Well, and it's getting harder and harder, I think, with I don't want to say it's
Oh.
pop culture and our culture making it so that women can have babies older and older, but they
Mm-hmm.
downplay the fact that some of them are an actual phenomenon as opposed to the norm. A lot of us probably aren't going to get pregnant at 40, 42, 45.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like,
going to be hard, you know. It doesn't mean it's impossible, certainly it's possible, but it's an outlier, and we have to make sure that we're letting people know this so that you're not sitting there, because really they talk about the maternal age at 35, which is,
hmm,
I think that's a little young, but at the same time you have to think about the health of your ovaries, and that's the other thing too, is that even if you're not going through the fertility process, um, there's a lot of things that acupuncture can do to make your reproductive health healthy so that it won't be a problem for you to conceive. So you don't
yes.
necessarily need to be struggling with infertility for acupuncture to have value in terms of making it simple for you to conceive, as well as making your pregnancy more comfortable. So a lot of women also just, see acupuncturists in order to make their pregnancies more comfortable. And then at the
Hmm.
end to support, like I said, the going inward that needs to happen for women, because they need to access parts of their brain that they're not usually accessing in order to go through labor. So I'm not a big advocate of women when they're close to labor being really busy with all the work they have to do, doing lots of things. I know they're trying to keep busy,
They
but
get
you
that
need to spend
nesting.
no, you need to be meditating, you need to have quiet, you need to have anything that is stressful kind of away from you so that your body can make the oxytocin itself and not have to be induced,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
I have several friends that like when it's the time, right, where you should be zhuzh, you should be calm. This is like if there's ever a time, right? And they're like, no, I have to clean my windows or I have to get this ready or I have to get that. And
Yes.
I understand that push, right? And part of it is it's hormonal, it's like the mental, like, oh, I've got to be ready. But I think that kind of goes back to like what you talked about, like culturally, there's just not, we don't have the big community, right? I mean, we can have friends and we can have family, but it's like it's just it's different, right? We're not all coming over and like wrapping ourselves around, these women who are getting ready to have a baby, right? And doing
No.
all of those things like in their stead. And so, we're in such this culture of like, well, we are an individual, we're going to do our things, we're going to take care of our stuff. And so I think that is hard. Um, but I do like what you said, right? It's good to slow. It's good to kind of connect with what's going on with your body, but also at the same time, I definitely get wanting to like stay busy and cuz it's
Yes.
stressful and, it's all a hot mess. It's a beautiful hot mess is what
Right.
it is. Um but yeah, I'm with you there.
And then also
Um
after birth, there's things that can be done with acupuncture to help with breast milk, people who suffer from mastitis,
mm,
postpartum depression, and just getting your hormones regulated, after, which, takes a year and a half, for women to get back to even some semblance of normal. But of course, we say 2 weeks
yeah.
and get back to work. Or, I mean, we're really not good
Yes.
in this country on maternity leave. And even if your
Or
employer
a
does
lot
have
of other
maternity
things, but
leave, you can't like take it all. Or, it's really hard for some
yes.
people to
It is
navigate
not
their system in.
culturally set up to support having children, physically birthing them, recovering from like we could spend a lot of time talking about that,
Yeah.
Alex. But
Yes.
I do want to ask, right? Because when I was like dealing with infertility and kind of like what you said, women were so hyper focused on like doing just the right thing, right? Because,
Yes.
well, if I did this on this one day, then maybe that's the reason why this happened. Um, and I was apprehensive about acupuncture. I was worried that it was not safe. And this was
Right.
years ago, right? And I've done a lot of research and I know what it says, right? But I am not like a professional at it. So can you kind of talk about the safety of doing acupuncture while trying to conceive, while pregnant, things like that?
Well, acupuncture is a very safe modality just in general. The needles are very small and they're as thin as a human hair in some cases. And then also, like I said, all of those years of anatomy, we're trained not to puncture things that were not supposed to be punctured. Um,
Yeah.
and then we don't do needles like in the bottoms of the feet. It's not
Mhm.
a
Those
painful experience. Everything is relaxing. We're not holding you down and then putting the needle in. You're
yes.
relaxed on a table, as
And
warm as
sometimes a warm
possible.
table.
Yeah, it is a warm table so that you can relax there. And even if you were to get up and have every needle still in you, you're not in danger of puncturing a lung or a major artery. Needles kind of move with you and they have a tendency to fall out if you move too much rather than drive
Oh.
in. Their needles don't drive in because they're so thin and wavy that they don't really
Mhm.
do that. So
Yeah, I will say there were a number that I did not feel
yeah,
at all.
exactly. There's most of the time you won't feel something. And if you are bothered by a needle during the treatment, you should let your acupuncturist know so that
Mhm.
they can adjust the needle because I don't want you lying here going, "Oh my god, I have a needle in my foot" the whole time. That
Yeah.
would be terrible. And then, of course, there's points that we aren't allowed to do during pregnancy. There's no points in the lower abdomen or in the lower back. We don't do cupping during pregnancy. There's some things that we just can't do.
Yeah.
But then there's also a lot of things that we can do during pregnancy. So, dealing with nausea or dealing with
Oh, yeah.
constipation. And like I said, all of the musculoskeletal pains that you have because of how your skeleton has to change in order to carry the baby. So there's a number of things that can be done and are done very safely with distal points. So points that are away from the body. We're not doing any points on the torso. We're not doing a whole lot of points in the neck and upper back, just because those are, a lot of downward descending points that we don't want to promote while we're trying to keep the baby, inside essentially.
Yeah.
So, and then
We're not
beauty
triggering
of it
labor
is
either.
is that as you get closer to the due date, you can start doing more points that have indications for downward descending or, in
Yes.
some cases opening the cervix, because you want to dilate the cervix before you stimulate contractions. So,
Yes.
there's an order to labor. We don't want to start a whole bunch of contractions and you not be dilated yet.
Yeah. The
So,
baby's like, "All right, let's
yep.
go." But the
So
door's not open yet.
a lot of times, acupuncture can be helpful in that sense, if you're really keen on, making sure that the order of birth is correct. So again, dilating the cervix, then supporting contractions, and eventually the breaking of the water, all of that. But again, it has to be in the right order so that you don't have to deal with induction or a C-section. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be doing a bunch of points that are getting her ready to go into full labor. We don't do that as acupuncturists. We're trying
Yeah.
to support the body's own process and getting things done in the right way.
Yes, and I will say, so when I went, Christy, right? I'm so bad with
Christy,
names.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and so I'm always hesitant. If I don't like have it written down, it falls out of my head and I feel terrible. But yeah, she was so thorough. And like when I so for I went and had a session. I'd never had one before. And so I didn't know what to expect, right? I just thought I'd go in and she'd poke some needles in me and it'd be fine. But I was not prepared for how in depth and like thorough like that history was and like all sorts of things. And um like it was very interesting. I mean, it caught me off guard. I mean, it's good, right? Like you guys want to
Yes.
know what's going on. You want to know details so that you can like more accurately kind of address different issues. But I thought it was really interesting. Right, so there's like the spot like right at the crown of your
Yep.
hair and like where
Hmm.
your hairline is. And that and like one that's like at the very top of my head, they
Uh-huh.
were like tingling.
Yes.
And so I had not talked with her. So my journey with infertility is I had recurrent pregnancy losses, but I had not talked with her about that. And I mean, she knows that, I work like with fertility and everything, but I was like, yeah, I'm like feeling tinklies here. She goes, yeah, we do that a lot. Like with patients who like suffer from miscarriages. And it was like one of those like weird moments. I was like, did I tell you that? And it was like one of those moments where like you can read all about acupuncture and you can read all about the benefits and how it does this and how that. And for me, that was like a very eye opening, like without even having that conversation, without, it just hit. There was a react, like a physical reaction, and
Yep.
I could see that, and so that was very interesting, and like, well,
Well, like who's I don't know who said, but someone wrote a book said the body never lies. But
yeah,
that's a lot of what we're doing with acupuncture is that we're trying to read the body to then figure out what's going on with the organs and the brain. Because
mm-hmm.
when you look at old forms of medicine, they couldn't open up the body because of infection, germs, all of that. It would just kill somebody. So
Yeah,
they always had to open up things after somebody was dead. But this is how we learned about things. And a lot of what is important in diagnosis and treatment with any patient is being able to read the symptoms of the body without having to do major tests and be
yeah,
invasive. You want to be minimally invasive and understand the signs that your body is trying to tell you. And so that's, probably, what Kirsty picks up on when we're in there with people. We want to sort of read, where they're leading us, to sort of understand how their body is operating so that we can fix it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was very, very cool. So what advice would you give to someone who's like kind of interested in acupuncture? I don't really know about it. I'm a little apprehensive. Like, what would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of having a talk with someone about, what it can do for them. So,
Mm-hmm.
coming in for an initial consult, not even having to do the acupuncture treatment itself, not feeling like you have to be pressured into that, but just coming in for a consultation, or just calling and asking questions. If you have questions, call an acupuncturist. A lot of the time, there's people at the front desk, but you could have a conversation with them, to just see, what could be done in your case, or going through and doing the history with them could really shed some light on maybe some things that you didn't know before that are a challenge that you could fix. You know,
Yeah.
um, so I mean I want to
I think
say,
that's
with
great. Ask
acupuncture,
it.
you really have to try it, and that's, that's hard for people to understand because you don't really get what an acupuncture treatment is until you're in there receiving it, you know?
Yes, I will agree with that.
Yep.
I will
And
agree with
so,
that.
that's sort of the hard part is that, there's a lot of things that acupuncture can do that aren't necessarily specific because we're working on the nerves. At a very fundamental way, we're working with blood flow to the nerves and regulating the nerve impulse. That is the basis of every movement in our body, every secretion from our
Mm-hmm.
endocrine glands, every thought that we have is a spark from a nerve. So it may seem non-specific, but there's a lot of things that can be done when you start to regulate the nerve that is not working right. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
the investigation that you're doing with your acupuncturist. So that's a lot of the questioning that we do. And then, the beauty of acupuncture is there something that we can do? So, we sit there and we look at your symptoms, and then how many times have you gone to a doctor, talked to them about your issue, They might give you a medication, but there's nothing really that can be done. Acupuncture
Yeah.
is very much a hands-on, can be done modality.
Yeah,
You
what
come
can
in
we
there
help
and something
today?
is done at the time. So, and a lot of people, feel the effects of acupuncture right away. So it's not something that you have to do. Um, you're not feeling nothing. You're not just sitting there going, what's going on? A lot of times you're going to feel
That is
something
true.
even from the first visit, even though it does have a cumulative effect. Um,
Mhm.
but even on the first visit, people generally feel some difference.
Oh, yeah, my husband's like, "You're in such a good mood." It's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just relaxed. I'm
Yeah.
I'm doing good. It was nice." So that's true. Well, awesome. Do you have any last thoughts that we've gotta tell people about acupuncture?
Well, the other,
Or
thing is that
holistic healing
we're
also?
yeah, so with our here at Gig Harbor Acupuncture, one of the things that we were talking about earlier was, fostering community, and that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons why it's Gig Harbor Acupuncture and Holistic Health as opposed to just Gig Harbor Acupuncture.
Mm,
Kirsty Dawkin, you had mentioned her before. She's,
yeah.
the owner of the clinic. She thinks it's very important, to have a community around you of other practitioners because no practitioner is alone. There's no
Yeah,
one
you're not an
person
island.
going to sit there and have the magic bullet that's going to do something. A lot of the time, we work in conjunction with people in our community. So it may be helping them find good chiropractic care, or having to find a good massage therapist, or, what finding a good naturopath that they would want to see. So,
Mhm.
for any aspect of your health, not just infertility or fertility work, we're talking about creating a community around you where there's people that you can talk to. Someone that you can talk to about your gut health that specializes in gut health, not
Mhm.
trying to um, grasp at straws. We have
Yeah.
the resource page on our website, gigharboracupuncture.com. There's a whole resources page that has listed all of the practitioners that we know and that we trust for a number of different things. There's naturopaths on there, there's oncologists on there, there's massage therapists on there, there's chiropractors on there. So all of that is very important to have a community. So
Oh,
just
absolutely.
like you provide a community. So that's how we, got connected. Again, it's
Mhm.
about providing a community for people to be treated as opposed to just siloing people into one modality and saying this is going to fix it completely.
Yeah,
Probably not. That's
probably
not the
not.
case. Yeah, you don't want to be. We're trying to foster people having a community as opposed to being alone.
Yeah, and I have to say that both you and Kirsty do such a lovely job of creating a like welcoming, non-pressuring environment,
Oh, that's
right? Like
good.
even after, after my session, like Kirsty gave me like a list of recommendations and information, and it was great. Like there was, I think sometimes there's a concern of like, oh, well, I'm going to get like pressure to do this or pressure to do that or to get this one thing. And it was, you could tell that you guys like truly come from a place of support and like you make the recommendations, but people are free to make their own choices. And I think that that creates a very safe space. Um, so I was very glad that I got to connect with you guys because, you know, you find people online and you're not sure, and it's nice to be
Right.
able to it's nice to be able to have a resource that I can say, yes, I absolutely trust them. I absolutely trust them to like have your best interest at heart. And I think that what you guys do is really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun. One of the things that I like to do is, when it's really rewarding when you see the baby born after all of that work.
It is so fun. It's one of
Yep.
my favorite things.
Mhm.
I'll get texts every now and then with like, "Hey, we made this. Thanks for the help." And I love it.
And it's a culmination of a long time of hard work,
Mhm.
and going through a lot. And so, um, that's something that, sometimes a lot of, women, they don't necessarily share with everybody how hard it was. But sometimes it's practitioners like you or me, that are standing there in those times so that they can go out into the world and make it look like everything was great. you know?
Yeah, and it's part of why I like being a fertility coach, and like I did not have like that kind of support when I was going through it. I had to kind of figure everything out on my own because I didn't know that this kind of support existed. Because again, I didn't know anything about like infertility because it's just not
Right.
talked about. Um, and like it's friends are great, family is great, and they can do their darndest to support you like in those roles, like even your partner. But your partner's also dealing with, that infertility in their own way and may not have the space. And so what I love about people that work like in this line of supporting people going through, infertility struggles or struggles in general is that that's all we're here for. Right? Like we are here to be that resource, right? You're not having to like worry, like, well, if I tell my friend that I'm struggling to get pregnant, or, that she's going to be like, oh, well, just try this, or have you just relax, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, we're not going to do that, right? It's a safe place to get very targeted, specific support for this journey that's like, I want to say niche, right? Because not everyone understands. A lot of people don't. Um, and so I think it's just nice that, like you said, we're building that community. We're trying to create that so that people don't have to be islands.
Right.
Well, awesome. And so you said gigharbororacupuncture.com, right? That's
Yeah,
the site.
gigharbororacupuncture.com. Yep, that's our
Okay.
website.
I will link that. And if you are in the like Kids app, Pierce, I think King County, Seattle, like if you're anywhere in that general area, I cannot recommend Gig Harbor Acupuncture and Holistic Health more. Check them out. But thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being on your podcast. I love
Yeah, it
podcasts.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And that's a wrap on this week's episode of Catching Up with Conception with me, Audra Smith, fertility coach. I want to thank you for joining us and ask you to subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you're listening on. It may seem small, but it really does make a big impact. Catch me on Instagram and TikTok at Fertility Coach Audra and on our next episode of Catching Up with Conception.